raking some burnt-out areas in California. All right, let's bring in Democratic California Congressman John Garamendi. Good to see you, Congressman.
Good to be with you, Frederica.
Okay, this is weird. I mean, it was pretty impactful, for the president to be in California and to see firsthand. And there were so many people who were looking forward to seeing the president so he could see for himself the reality of it. But then when the president talked about, controlling the forest, and other countries do it, and the raking, I mean, that just opened the floodgates of stuff. And now you've got the Finnish president, who is saying it's not quite, that wasn't quite the conversation. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, my thoughts are, first of all, it's a horrible, horrific situation in Paradise. Over 9,000 homes destroyed, and 73 or more deaths now. It just couldn't be more horrible. And so the first thing is that this has just been a tragedy for thousands, a town of 26,000 wiped out. Now, there is an issue of how are we going to survive in the era of climate change. This is a very real national and frankly, worldwide crisis of climate change and a very rapidly changing environment in which all of us are living. For California, we do get rains in the winter, even though we did have a 5-year drought. We did have winter rains, and the vegetation grew. The issue is things got very, very hot, and the vegetation got very, very dry. In the forest, both private as well as the national forest, millions upon millions, perhaps hundreds of millions of trees are dead as a result of climate change and beetles and other stresses. We have a forest management problem, and the president is correct about a management issue that we must deal with. Mismanagement is the wrong word. Smokey the Bear, no fires in the forest. Logging has been curtailed. We need to manage the forest. Fortunately, we do have a new piece of legislation that passed last spring that gives the Forest Services 2 budgets, one budget for fighting fires and another for forest management. However, keep this in mind. The fire in the Paradise area was not in the national forest. It was on private lands that swept into the town.
And it's still unclear exactly, what sparked that. They're looking into it, but
correct.
It's a very complicated issue. And the governor, Jerry Brown, he was standing alongside the president when the president made those comments, as was the governor-elect. Neither decided to, correct at the time, but Governor Jerry Brown did get on CBS early today, and he tried to spell out just how complicated it is. Listen.
Where Paradise is, of course, is surrounded by federally managed land. These are national forests. They're not state parks, and they're not private property by Californians. So it is the federal government, and the fact is that managing the forests is part of it. They're a lot denser than they were 200 years ago. But on top of that, we have this 5-year drought. We have reduced rainfall. We have the dryness that turns vegetation and bushes and houses and trees literally into timber. So it's ready to explode. So there's an atmospheric element, which is part of the natural cycle. And then there is an increasing effect of climate change. In fact, I have read specifically peer-reviewed scientific articles that say that the amount of land burnt in California over the last 15 years has doubled because of climate change.
Did you make that case to President Trump?
I certainly raised it, but I didn't feel that that was where we needed to go. We need the money.
So you really are echoing one another in terms of, all the proponents here, what makes this fire as bad as it is, but go ahead.
Well, there's just another piece to that, in that the president has in his mind that the forest can be managed like his golf courses. That's just not the case, but we do need to better manage the forest. We call it forest health. Needs to be done. We're going to need federal money for that. At the same time, and I think this is why Governor Brown didn't really drive the climate change issue with the president, was that we're going to need federal money, probably in the range of $500 to $700 million to rebuild the public infrastructure that's been destroyed in all of these fires down in Malibu as well as here in Northern California. And so we do need the federal government involvement in this, and we're going to have to get that done in the next 2 weeks in the final lame duck session.
Right, trying to prioritize the immediate needs. So let me switch gears, if I could, Congressman, right now and talk about midterms. Democrats dominated, across the state of California, your state, including winning all the seats up for grabs in Orange County. In your view, what was the momentum behind this? How did this happen?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. First of all, I will be going to Orange County here in a couple of hours. There's a big celebration down there, and rightly so. Years and years ago, Democrats would simply skip over Orange County. You'd go to Los Angeles County, and then you try to get as far south in San Diego County as you could. But right now, Orange County is a blue county. All of the seats are in Democratic control. So why did it happen? Well, the Democrats have always been for the people. Our issues, whether it's health care or infrastructure or tax policy, is to make sure that the middle class and the lower class has an opportunity, whether it's education, health care, on and on. And I think people are beginning to realize that, particularly after this last session in which the tax cut, $2 trillion tax cut, 87% of the benefit go to major corporations and to the super wealthy. People say, well, wait a minute. And then there was the health care issue. And finally, President Trump. All of those things came together and gave an opportunity for, finally, after more than actually 3/4 of a century, for Orange County to turn blue.
All right, Congressman John Garamendi, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it. All right, still ahead, a giant in Florida.